The GPS signal flickered twice before directing the horse trailer down a narrow dirt road in rural Montana. Behind the wheel, Frank Miles checked his delivery papers one more time, certain something wasn't right. The address read Meadowbrook Ranch, but the property stretching before him looked nothing like the high-end equestrian facility he'd been told to expect. What he saw instead was a small, weathered Therapeutic riding center with a faded sign that read Meadowbrook Healing Stables. A handful of modest paddocks surrounded a converted barn, and in the distance, an elderly woman in mud-stained overalls was leading what appeared to be a miniature pony. "You've got to be kidding me," Frank muttered, pulling his rig to a stop beside the barn. The woman, who introduced herself as Dorothy Mallister, age 71, walked over with a confused expression, creasing her sun-weathered face. "Can I help you, young man?" "I've got a delivery here for Meadowbrook Ranch," Frank said, already sensing the mistake. "One Geeling, name of Midnight's Verdict. Premium show J jumper worth about $200,000 according to these papers." Dorothy's eyes widened behind her thick glasses. "Son, I think you've got the wrong Meadowbrook. This here is Meadowbrook Healing Stables. We work with special needs children. The fancy ranch you're looking for is probably Meadowbrook Estates, about 40 miles north." But Frank's boss had been very specific about making this delivery before nightfall, and the sun was already sinking toward the horizon. Besides, his truck's transmission had been making concerning noises for the last 50 miles. "Look, ma'am, I'm supposed to deliver this horse to a Meadowbrook facility in this county, and my paperwork says this is it. Once I unload him, sorting out the details becomes your problem, not mine." Before Dorothy could protest further, Frank was already opening the trailer door. "I'm just following orders. You'll have to contact whoever sent him." What emerged from that trailer was the most magnificent horse Dorothy had ever seen in person. Midnight's Verdict stood 17 hands high, a stunning black warm blood with a coat that gleamed like polished obsidian. His muscular build and elegant conformation spoke of years of careful breeding and expensive training. But it was his eyes that made Dorothy's breath catch. They weren't wild or spirited like you'd expect from a champion jumper. They were hollow, defeated, barely registering his new surroundings. "Sweet mercy," Dorothy whispered, as the horse was led into a temporary paddock. She could see old pressure marks on his mouth where a harsh bit had been used, and his body language screamed exhaustion, not from physical labor, but from something deeper, something broken inside. Frank handed her a thick envelope of papers before climbing back into his truck. "All his documentation is in there. Good luck, lady. You're going to need it." As the trailer disappeared down the dirt road, Dorothy found herself alone with a horse that cost more than her entire facility, looking at documents that told a story of repeated rejection. According to the papers, Midnight's Verdict had been returned by 3 different buyers in the past 8 months. Refuses to jump. Unpredictable behavior. Dangerous for competitive riding. One trainer had written simply, "Beautiful horse, broken spirit. Should recommend retirement or sale for non-performance purposes." "Well now," Dorothy said softly, approaching the paddock fence. "Seems like both of us got handed something unexpected today." The horse didn't react to her voice, just stood motionless, staring at nothing. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this story of second chances, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We share incredible horse stories every day, and trust me, you won't want to miss where this one goes. Now, let's get back to Dorothy and the magnificent horse nobody wanted. The first person to visit was Dorothy's granddaughter Olivia, a 28-year-old occupational therapist who helped run the therapeutic programs at the stables. She arrived the next morning and stopped dead when she saw Midnight's Verdict in the paddock. "Grandma Dorothy, what in the world is that? A warm blood." "That's Midnight's Verdict," Dorothy replied, leaning against the fence rail. "Got delivered here by mistake yesterday. Worth more than this whole property, according to his papers. Problem is, he's been rejected by everyone who's tried to work with him." Olivia read through the documentation, her professional eye-catching details Dorothy had missed. "Look at this timeline. His last 3 owners had him for less than 2 months each. And look at these training notes. resistant to standard training methods, exhibits learned helplessness, shows no interest in jumping despite previous success. What does that mean in regular English? It means someone broke his will. Grandma probably pushed him too hard, too young, used harsh methods to force performance. Now he's shut down completely. Cheech, it's like equine. PTSD. Dorothy watched the horse carefully. In her 50 years of working with animals, she'd seen this before, though never in such an expensive animal. Midnight's verdict wasn't dangerous or aggressive. He was simply gone, physically present, but mentally absent. The trailer company is supposed to call me today about picking him up and taking him to the right place, Dorothy said quietly. But part of me wonders if this mistake might have been meant to happen. By afternoon, the situation became clearer. The correct Meadowbrook Estates had been expecting a different horse entirely, a young mare for their breeding program. Midnight's verdict's actual destination had been a private buyer in California, but that buyer had just filed for bankruptcy. The horse's current owner, a wealthy investor named Sterling Moore, was unreachable on a business trip overseas. So basically, Olivia said after making a dozen phone calls, nobody knows what to do with him, and nobody's in a hurry to claim him. Then, I guess he stays here for now, Dorothy decided. At least until someone figures out where he's supposed to go. That evening, something unexpected happened. One of Dorothy's therapy students, a 9-year-old boy named Wesley, who had autism and rarely spoke, broke away from his usual routine and walked straight to Midnight's verdict's paddock. Before anyone could stop him, Wesley had climbed through the fence rails and was standing directly in front of the massive horse. Dorothy's heart jumped into her throat. A horse this size could seriously hurt a child, especially one who might not read warning signals properly. But as she rushed over, she saw something that made her freeze. Midnight's verdict had lowered his enormous head until it was level with Wesley's face. The boy reached out one small hand and placed it on the horse's nose. Neither moved. They just stood there. Two beings who lived mostly in their own worlds, somehow finding a moment of perfect connection. "Don't move," Olivia whispered beside Dorothy. "Just watch." For 5 minutes, the boy and the horse stood together in complete silence. Then Wesley spoke, his voice clear and strong, in a way his teacher said rarely happened. "You're sad. I'm sad sometimes too. But it's okay here." When Wesley finally walked back through the fence, he was smiling. Something his mother said he'd been doing less and less lately. Midnight's verdict was watching him go, and for the first time since arriving, there was something other than emptiness in the horse's eyes. Just a flicker, but it was there. "Did you see that?" Dorothy breathed. Olivia nodded slowly, her clinical training wearing with what she just witnessed. "Grandma, I think that horse just recognized a kindred spirit." That night, Dorothy made a decision that would change everything. She called the number on Midnight's verdict's papers and left a message for Sterling Moore. "Mr. Moore, this is Dorothy Mallister at Meadowbrook Healing Stables. Your horse was delivered to us by mistake, but I'd like to propose something. Let him stay here for a while. No cost to you. I think he might need what we do here, and I think our kids might need him too. Call me when you get this." The response came 3 days later, not from Moore himself, but from his assistant, a harried-sounding woman named Patricia. "Mr. Moore says, if you want to keep the horse temporarily, that's fine. He's trying to decide whether to sell him or send him to a retirement facility anyway. The horse is insured, and all his care costs are covered through a trust. Just don't let anything happen to him, and we'll sort out the details when Mr. Moore returns from Asia next month." "So basically," Olivia said when Dorothy relayed the conversation, "we're a free horse-sitting service for a billionaire." Or Dorothy countered, "We've been given a month to help heal a horse that everyone else has given up on." The transformation didn't happen overnight. For the first week, Midnight's verdict remained disconnected, going through the motions of eating and drinking, but showing no interest in anything around him. Dorothy didn't try to ride him or work him. She simply let him exist, spending an hour each morning sitting on a bucket outside his stall, talking to him about nothing in particular. "You know, I lost my husband 15 years ago," she told the horse one morning. "Everyone said I should sell this place, move into town, take it easy. But healing isn't about taking it easy. It's about finding something worth showing up for every day. I think maybe you forgot what that feels like." The breakthrough came during the second week when Wesley's mother brought him for his regular therapy session. The boy immediately asked to see the sad horse, and Dorothy, against her better judgment, let him spend time in the paddock while she supervised from just outside the fence. Wesley didn't try to ride Midnight's Verdict or put a halter on him. He just sat in the grass nearby and drew pictures in a notebook, occasionally talking to the horse about his drawings. Slowly, over the course of an hour, the horse moved closer until he was standing directly over the boy, providing shade from the Montana sun. "He likes you," Wesley said matter-of-factly. "You should stay here forever." Something shifted in that moment. Dorothy couldn't explain it scientifically, couldn't point to a specific behavior change, but she could feel it. The horse was starting to wake up from whatever nightmare had consumed him. By the third week, other children were asking to meet Midnight's Verdict. Dorothy set strict rules. No sudden movements, no loud noises, always supervised, but she allowed brief interactions. A girl with cerebral palsy who struggled with confidence sat beside him and read aloud from her favorite book. A teenager with severe anxiety brushed his mane for 20 minutes in focused silence. A boy with Down syndrome taught him to play a game that involved touching different colored cones with his nose. None of it was traditional horse training. There were no jumping exercises, no performance goals, no pressure to be anything other than present. And somehow, that absence of pressure was exactly what Midnight's Verdict needed. Olivia documented everything with careful notes and videos. Her professional interest piqued by what she was witnessing. "Grandma, this is remarkable. He's engaging with these kids in ways he reportedly wouldn't engage with experienced trainers. I think the key is that the kids have no agenda. They're not trying to make him do anything. They're just being with him." "Maybe that's what he needed all along," Dorothy said. "Someone who wanted his companionship more than his performance." On the morning of the 28th day, Dorothy arrived at the barn to find Midnight's Verdict doing something she hadn't seen since his arrival. He was playing, rearing up slightly, tossing his head or trotting in circles around his paddock with an energy that looked almost like joy. When he saw Dorothy, he came directly to the fence and nudged her shoulder with his nose. "Well, good morning to you, too." Dorothy laughed, tears unexpectedly stinging her eyes. "Welcome back, beautiful boy." That afternoon, Sterling Moore finally called personally. His voice was crisp, businesslike. "Ms. Mallister, I understand my horse has been staying at your facility." I'll be sending a trailer to pick him up next week. I found a retirement farm in Virginia that will take him." Dorothy's heart sank. "Mr. Moore, I know he's your horse, and you can do what you want with him, but I need to tell you something. Midnight's Verdict is coming back to life here. He's connecting with our therapy students in ways I've never seen before. Please just come visit before you make a final decision. See what's happening here." There was a long pause. "Miss Mallister, that horse is worth $200,000 and can't even do the one thing he was bred and trained to do. I don't see how playing with disabled children is a good use of a premium warm blood's potential." The words stung, but Dorothy kept her voice steady. "With respect, sir, I think you're measuring the wrong kind of potential." Sterling Moore did come to visit, Sash arriving 5 days later in a Mercedes that looked absurdly out of place next to Dorothy's rusty pickup truck. He was exactly what Dorothy expected, mid-50s, expensive suits slightly loosened for the rural setting. The kind of man who was used to things being quantified and optimized. "I'll be honest, Ms. Mallister," he said, surveying the modest facility. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to see here." "Just watch," Dorothy said simply, leading him to the riding arena, where Olivia was running a therapy session. 6 children were in the arena, ranging in age from 7 to 14, each with different challenges. Wesley was there, along with the girl with cerebral palsy, the anxious teenager, and 3 others. And in the center of them all was Midnight's Verdict, wearing no saddle or bridle, just a simple halter. What Moore witnessed over the next hour defied his every assumption about horses and their purpose. The children weren't riding. They were simply moving with the horse, playing elaborate games of follow the leader, setting up obstacle courses for him to walk through, even having him stand perfectly still while they did stretching exercises beneath his belly. But what struck Moore most was the horse's demeanor. Midnight's Verdict was attentive, engaged, even playful. When Wesley accidentally dropped a ball, the horse picked it up in his teeth and brought it back. When the girl with cerebral palsy struggled to reach a colored cone, the horse moved it closer with his nose. These weren't trained behaviors. They were spontaneous acts of cooperation and connection. "That's impossible," Moore muttered. "That horse wouldn't even walk on a lead line without binging when I bought him 6 months ago." "That's because everyone was trying to make him be something he's not," Dorothy said quietly. "Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is let someone be exactly who they are." After the session, Moore asked to see Midnight's Verdict alone. Dorothy supervised from a distance as the businessman entered the paddock. Probably the first time he'd been this close to the horse since purchasing him. "I'm told you're a different animal now," Moore said, his voice lacking its earlier certainty. Midnight's Verdict studied him calmly, showing none of the anxiety or shutdown behavior from before. Then the horse did something that made Moore's breath catch. He stepped forward and rested his head against the man's chest. It's the same gesture of trust he'd been showing the children. Dorothy watched Moore's expression shift, saw the exact moment when a horse stopped being a financial asset and became a living being with needs and feelings. When Moore emerged from the paddock 10 minutes later, his expensive shirt was covered in horsehair and dirt. "Miss Mallister, I need to ask you something. If I were to donate Midnight's Verdict to your facility, would you be able to care for him long term?" Dorothy's heart leaped, but she kept her voice measured. "Mr. Moore, with all due respect, we're barely scraping by as it is. I can't afford to feed a horse that eats premium grain, and I certainly can't afford his medical care or insurance. What if I endowed a trust specifically for his care enough to cover all his expenses for the rest of his life, plus a stipend to help support your facility's operations? Why would you do that?" Moore looked back at the paddock where Midnight's Verdict was now interacting with Wesley, who'd been allowed to stay late. "Because I just watched a $200,000 show jumper do something worth far more than winning competitions. He gave those kids confidence, connection, and joy. That's not a failed investment. That's a successful transformation. I was just measuring the wrong kind of success." The paperwork took 3 weeks to finalize, but by mid-September, Midnight's Verdict officially belonged to Meadowbrook Healing Stables. The trust Moore established covered all the horse's care costs, plus an additional $50,000 annually to support the facility's programs. But the real miracle wasn't the money. It was watching a horse that had been declared useless find his true calling. Midnight's Verdict became the cornerstone of Dorothy's therapy program. Working with dozens of children over the following months, he seemed to have an innate ability to sense which children needed gentle playfulness, which needed quiet companionship, and which needed a strong, stable presence to lean on. Wesley, who'd been the first to connect with the horse, began speaking more regularly in his other environments. His teachers reported improved social interaction and emotional regulation. His mother told Dorothy through tears that Wesley had slept in his own bed for the first time in months because he felt, quote, safe, like I do with the sad horse who got happy. Other children showed similar progress. The teenager with anxiety reported fewer panic attacks. The girl with cerebral palsy gained confidence in her physical abilities. Parents began telling Dorothy that their children talked about Midnight's Verdict constantly, using their time with him as motivation to complete difficult therapy exercises. "It's like he knows exactly what each kid needs," Olivia observed during one of their debriefing sessions. "We're starting to get referrals from therapists 3 counties over." Sterling Moore visited twice more that year, once bringing his own teenage daughter, who'd been struggling with depression. Watching her spend 2 hours simply sitting with Midnight's Verdict, finally opening up about her feelings, seemed to shift something in him. "I bought that horse to win competitions and increase my investment portfolio," he told Dorothy during his last visit. Instead, he taught me that worth isn't measured in ribbons and trophies. Thank you for seeing what he really needed. As the Montana winter painted the landscape white, Dorothy often found herself standing at the paddock fence, watching Midnight's Verdict interact with the other therapy horses. The hollowed-eyed, broken animal that had arrived by mistake was completely gone. In his place was a horse who approached each day with curiosity and purpose, who seemed to understand that his job wasn't to jump perfectly or perform flawlessly, but to simply show up and be present for children who needed him. You know what the beautiful thing is? Dorothy told Olivia one evening as they watched Wesley teaching Midnight's Verdict a new game. Everyone thought he was sent to the wrong farm. The delivery driver, the people expecting him somewhere else, probably even the horse himself. But looking at him now, I don't think there was any mistake at all. I think he was delivered exactly where he was meant to be. Sometimes the wrong address turns out to be the rightest place in the world. The story.